Hey everybody, I'm Will Megson. I'm one of the founders of Bouncer. Bouncer is an SDK for mobile apps, scanning credit cards and photo IDs. I'm actually not going to talk much about Bouncer, but I wanted to tell you a couple of stories from our experience working on fraud and account security that I think are fun. And then for the first half, and then the second half, wanted to talk a little bit about just some of the trends that we're seeing right now that we think are interesting in the industry. And we'd love to catch up afterwards. So once the talk's over, please grab me if you guys want to nerd out on account security and fraud stuff, because I love talking about it. A little bit about our background. There's three of us. I'm the one over here on the right. Sam is my former engineering manager from Lyft, and Stephen Liu reported to him. It was our sort of tech lead and then engineering manager at Lyft as well. So we're sort of like the Lyft crew is the way to think about us. Before Lyft, Sam and Stephen both worked together at Twitter on their fake accounts team, building out the stuff to prevent spam on Twitter. I was at Groupon doing mobile app conversion stuff. So just a little color on our backgrounds. So when we joined Lyft, we went through sort of this like 4-stage process of figuring out account security and fraud. And I joined as the payments PM. Like there was no fraud in my title at all. And my background is, my undergrad degree is like in oil painting. And then I went to Groupon to become a product manager. And then I went to Lyft and I never worked in payments. And they're like, hey, here's a payments team. You should read the Stripe API docs and get started. So it was definition of getting thrown in the deep end. I was there for just about 3 years, and sort of late 2015 through late 2018 was kind of the range there. And we've seen this pattern on the bottom repeat at basically every mobile tech company that we've had the opportunity to talk to. So we see it as a common pattern that repeats. When I started, it was what's fraud? I've never even heard about fraud. What's a chargeback? How does that work? Let's just think about growth, because we're competing with Uber and it's all existential all the time. So this is priority number 10, right? And then after a while, you see a fraud spike happen. Everyone freaks out and they're like, why is fraud so high? What's going on? We're getting calls from the payment networks. In the US, Visa, MasterCard have rules. So if you go above a certain level of chargeback fraud, you can have your card processing get turned off and it gets super severe. And then what almost everybody does is they go to the thermostat and slam it to the hottest temperature possible to try to shut off the fraud. And inevitably you start closing up your funnel. You get what are called false positives. You start kicking good users off your platform, or you ask them all to I don't know, add a username, password, reset flow, or something like this. These really churny, bad user experiences. And you're not measuring it in the right way, so you don't understand how much damage you're doing to the growth of the company. And then you inevitably get some escalation where false positives and good users lost, it switches and becomes the highest priority. So we went through that whole cycle. I think for us, the catalyzing moment is that we disabled one of our board members, which was a really fun. So it was the CEO Logan emailing me, being how are you so stupid that you did this? And I'm I don't know, what am I doing here? So that was sort of a fun time. And then you finally get smart enough on the far right where it's about balance, and you start to realize okay, we have a way to detect higher risk stuff. In our case, we experimented with some third parties like Civ Science and Stripe Radar and a couple of others. We ended up rolling our own custom machine learning models in-house, which was its own sort of learning curve and really fun, and learned a lot there. And we started to realize, oh, there's actually trade-offs between how confident you are in a given user action, in our case, hailing a ride, maybe it's purchasing a widget, whatever it is, and the outcome or assessment that you make, and you realize you have to sort of balance those two things over time. So we finally sort of landed there. I have fun stories from all 4 of these categories, so come talk to me if you want to nerd out on some of it. I wanted to share just one that I thought was especially either fun or horrifying, depending on your perspective. This one is actually a screenshot from Uber, but we saw this. We talked to the DD team as well. They saw it over in China. And this is just to give you a sense of those in the room that haven't worked directly with payment fraud, it's kind of what is a chargeback? Why are people even using stolen credit cards? So this one was a really fun example. So there are these credit card dumps that happen online, and people buy them usually with cryptocurrency these days, and they'll get this CSV full of stolen credit card numbers, and then they'll have to go monetize those stolen credit cards. So this crew is based in mainland China. What they would do is create fake accounts on ride-sharing services, load it up with a stolen credit card, go market discounted rides, typically using things like Taobao, and they would say, hey, if you want a cheap Uber ride or Lyft ride or DoorDash delivery or what have you, add us into WeChat, and whenever you want that airport ride, just don't go to the app, just chat us, and we'll give you the car. And so and the customer service was like awesome. So like you would go in and it would be like, okay, this is this ride from downtown SF to the airport. Normally that's like, I don't know, a $60 ride. We'll give it to you for 20. Here's like the screenshot of your driver coming in. It's a fake name in the app, but the driver doesn't care. And they'll give you like your ETAs, they'll do like real-time chat support. It was awesome. So behind the scenes, the customer may not even realize. They might think it's like an Uber or a Lyft promo, but it's totally stolen card fraud behind the scenes. And this was like huge. Like they were doing this on a massive scale throughout the entire US, reselling rides to native Chinese speakers typically, although they were doing things on ICQ and English as well. So it was amazing. And behind the scenes, the fake account creation was full automation, using emulators, lat-long spoofing in really convincing ways, setting up through click farms and things like that to deceive some of the detection stuff we had in place. So really, really cool stuff. Or horrifying, depending on your perspective. So after I left Lyft, Sam and I had an opportunity to, this is late 2018, to go into DoorDash and help them, we did consulting with them as we were doing product development on what to build, and help build up their sort of fraud strategy. When we came in, they were going through the same sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, which we didn't know about at Lyft, but we knew about once we came to DoorDash, and they were kind of where I drew the arrow. So it was like, they knew about fraud, they had 2 engineers working on it, and they were just starting to see false positives come in. And I'll tell you, it's like so much more fun going through it the second time when you actually know what's happening versus like hitting your head against the wall for the first time again and again. So this was a much better and chill experience where we could kind of tell them what was coming and help them sort of get prepared for it. And it gave us sort of another data point to understand, okay, like where are these like mobile first companies kind of like repeating or reinventing the wheel, and where are these some shared pain points and things like that. So that's sort of the end of the storytelling about sort of the experiences and some of the stuff that we saw. I want to talk a little bit about just kind of like our understanding of how companies like this are kind of thinking about fraud and some of the trends that are out there that are changing the thinking and getting more to the cutting edge. So I don't know how many of you have worked in like fraud prediction or account security sort of use cases, but one way to think about it is that you have all your users coming into your application on the top. That's 100% at the very top. And then at the bottom, you have something that's like scoring them. So either it's a third party or an internal business rule or machine learning model. And you might get down to like 1% that you think of as your bad users. This would be like a pretty high performance system. This is called the positive rate. So you have a 1% positive rate in this sort of setup. Via that risk score. And I think in the old world, this is pretty much how it works. So it's like, okay, you put up a risk score, you find the 1% of bad users, and you just block them. You kick them out of the app. And I think what we're seeing in the last several years is an evolution in the thinking about how this works to realize that those aren't bad users at the bottom. Those are like risky users. And the important difference between that is that like up to half of the risky users are actually good users where you made a mistake. So let's say you had 50% precision, for example. And so effectively what you're doing, if you take 1% and divide it by 2, is you're taking 50 basis points of your top line and like kicking it out over time, which is not great. So when you read some stuff online, I just threw up some blog post title shots here. The top one's from Airbnb. The bottom left one is from Bolt, the startup, if anyone's familiar. I really like their philosophy and approach for their anti-fraud stuff, and they wrote a great blog post describing it. The bottom one is from my co-founder, Sam King, who wrote that when he was at Lyft. But what all these the writing you're seeing out there in this area have in common is this evolution in thinking around getting smarter about the experience for those folks that are going down to the 1%. And it's not a block anymore. It's like, how do we get smarter about assessing who we're actually dealing with? So this is like a overly complicated slide, but I'll just walk through it very quickly. So at Lyft, this is specifically on our handling of suspicious signups using phone number authentication. When we were coming in, we were looking at client behavioral signals as they were coming in through the login flow, running an algorithm to determine if it's suspicious. Most of the time, just logging them in. They'd go to the Lyft home screen here. And then occasionally, we would give them what we referred to as a user challenge, right? In our case, it was a confirmation of a user account here, and we were fighting this thing called recycled phone numbers, not credit card fraud. But the principle's the same. You take them out, you put them in the challenge, ask them a simple question, and then give them a way out, like creating an account or passing and coming back into the app. So one of the really interesting things is that a lot of the hard part about this sort of exists here, but this challenge stuff is kind of new. And if you look at the ecosystem today, a lot of it is this sort of old school stuff. So the thing on the left is called a knowledge-based authentication. You might have seen this if you sign up for a bank or try to relog into your bank or whatever. This is like what the Equifax breach leaked. So it's all the questions you might see in your credit report and stuff like that. This screenshot on the right I put in to represent manual review. So this is the other one that's common. It's like get a human to go look at your account details and make a judgment about whether you're risky or not. And one of the things that's interesting is that these work, well, the one on the left works before data breaches. The one on the right works okay in like a desktop e-commerce context where you can add a couple days between the assessment and the shipping. But when you're talking about a mobile-first, real-time, I need a ride to an airport, or I need my food delivered hot, this type of thinking just sort of breaks down. So you're seeing this explosion of experiments happening in this space that I think are pretty interesting. This is data breaches over time. So this is the knowledge-based stuff on the left-hand side. This is why it doesn't work anymore. And we tested this. So you could see fraudsters come through, fill out the information, and they would just go on to commit fraud. And it's because they're buying the Equifax data online. So the data's bearing out that this stuff is going sideways. OK, so this is the cool new school stuff. So if old school is KBA and the manual review, what are the cool kids up to? I'm not including us in here. We're in this space. WeChat has this awesome challenge when you sign up and they think you might be a bot, where you have to complete a puzzle and you're just sliding the piece over to fit it into where it goes. So it's the easiest puzzle to solve of all time. But the point here is not the difficulty of solving the puzzle. They're just sucking out all the data as you drag your finger across the screen to make sure that you're actually on that iPhone that you are claiming through the signals that you send up or saying that you're on. So this is are you a Python script or an emulator pretending to be an iPhone, or are you actually a user coming in and signing up for an iPhone? So it's automation prevention. But for good users, this thing is dead simple to solve. It's almost impossible to mess that up. And then on the right, it got a little blurry when I made it bigger. This is a challenge for account recovery on Facebook, which I think is brilliant. They ask you for confirming the face of someone they know as your friend. And so this is a case where they're using a knowledge-based authentication, but it's a unique piece of knowledge that they have access to and they know isn't in the broader domain. And they have a unique expertise within the facial recognition technology stack to be able to actually prompt this question. So nobody but Facebook could do this question. It's unusually easy for good users to answer this correctly, and it's extremely difficult for bad actors to know who all your friends are and what their faces look like, until some horrifying facial database breach happens, and then we read those headlines, and then they'll have to evolve here. But the way that these companies, and in general, a lot of companies are thinking about this, is basically that balance of really easy for good users to confirm who they are while making it really hard for bad actors to lie about it and sign up. Last trend I wanted to talk about is that there's this exponential growth happening in the ability of smartphone hardware to run more complicated machine learning models locally on the device. So this is, I pulled this from Twitter. This is not an original slide that I made, but it was on the iPhone 11 launch, which is the graph all the way on the right. And this is a deep convolutional neural network. It's something that we're using, and it's images processed per second over time. And so as you see, iPhone X to iPhone XR here, major step function improvement. It's because Apple made it possible for third-party developers to access the machine learning ASIC that's in the phone itself. So there's dedicated hardware to run these models for the first time. And this is super helpful because it creates the ability to do more sophisticated decision-making with broader data without needing a direct connection to the internet in many cases. And you can also do bigger things like image analysis. Or looking at lots and lots of signals on your phone and running a sophisticated model on it. So this is really cool. So last slide for me, I'm going to make a prediction in this space. We think about account security kind of broadly breaking into these 4 questions. And we think that there's going to be a lot of companies and vendors and startups and all sorts of stuff that are going to be getting into the space of how to better answer these 4 fundamental questions in new and novel ways. And as we all start logging into apps, you're going to start seeing these types of experiences sort of crop up more and more. And it's not going to be the knowledge-based authentication stuff that we're used to. Are you authorized to use the payment that you're using? Are you a human or a bot? It's like that puzzle thing. You can think of it that way. Session management, so we authorized you and now you're coming back. Did someone ATO you or account take over you or take you over? And then who are you in the real world? And we think of this as like the driver's license scanning stuff, tying your real identity to who you're signing up as. So if you're a delivery driver or a Lyft driver, et cetera, getting better and smarter about confirming that stuff. Cool. I always love to nerd out about this stuff. Please grab me afterwards. Tons of war stories and things, and always happy to hear about what you guys are working on. Thank you.